Before we begin, imagine a world where a single gunshot could change the course of human history forever. A world ruled by powerful empires, driven by ambition, fear, nationalism, and military power. A world on the brink of collapse. What started as a political assassination in a quiet European city would soon ignite a global conflict that killed millions, destroyed empires, and reshaped the future of humanity. This is the complete story of World War I. From the rising tensions in Europe, to the brutal trench warfare of the Western Front, from the collapse of empires to the birth of a new world order, we're going to explore every major event that defined one of the deadliest wars in history. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss future documentaries and historical deep dives like this one. If you enjoy history explained in a cinematic and engaging way, you're in the right place. Now, let's go back to the early 1900s and uncover how the world descended into war. Imagine a world balanced on the edge of collapse. Across Europe, powerful empires ruled over millions of people. Industrial cities were booming, and nations competed fiercely for military strength, colonies, and global influence. On the surface, the world looked stable and prosperous. But underneath that calm exterior, tensions were building rapidly. This was Europe in the early 1900s, a continent filled with rivalries, secret agreements, and growing distrust. Every major power feared being left behind. Every nation believed it needed to become stronger than its neighbors. And slowly, almost invisibly, Europe was moving toward disaster. Four major forces were driving the continent toward war: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism meant countries were building massive armies and navies, preparing for future conflict. Germany and Britain were engaged in an intense naval arms race, constantly building larger and more powerful warships. Military leaders gained enormous influence, and many believed that war was inevitable. At the same time, Europe became divided into competing alliances. France, Russia, and Britain formed the Triple Entente. Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance. These agreements were designed to maintain peace through balance, but instead they created a dangerous chain reaction waiting to happen. If one country entered a conflict, its allies would likely be pulled in as well. Imperialism added even more tension. European powers were competing for colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. These colonies provided resources, wealth, and prestige, but competition for global dominance created resentment and suspicion between nations. Then there was nationalism. Across Europe, people were developing stronger identities tied to language, culture, and ethnicity. In some places, nationalism united countries. In others, especially in the Balkans, it created instability and rebellion. The Balkans became one of the most dangerous regions in Europe. Different ethnic groups wanted independence from larger empires, particularly the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Nationalist movements spread rapidly, and violence became increasingly common. Europe had become like a giant powder keg. All it needed was a spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, traveled to Sarajevo in Bosnia. During his visit, a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinated the Archduke and his wife. The assassination shocked Europe. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and issued harsh demands, known as an ultimatum. Serbia accepted most of the demands, but refused others. Austria-Hungary declared war. What followed was a chain reaction unlike anything the world had ever seen. Russia mobilized its army to defend Serbia. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia. France prepared to support Russia. Germany then declared war on France and launched the Schlieffen Plan, a strategy designed to defeat France quickly before turning east to fight Russia. To reach France rapidly, Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country. Britain had promised to protect Belgium's neutrality, so Britain declared war on Germany. Within days, Europe exploded into conflict. What started as a regional crisis became a world war. At first, many people believed the war would end quickly. Crowds cheered as soldiers marched through city streets. Young men volunteered enthusiastically, convinced they would return home within months. But the reality of modern warfare was far more brutal than anyone expected. On the Western Front, stretching across France and Belgium, armies dug massive trench systems to defend their positions. These trenches soon extended hundreds of miles. The war became trapped in a deadly stalemate. Life inside the trenches was horrific. Soldiers lived surrounded by mud, rats, disease, and constant fear. Heavy rain flooded trenches, creating miserable conditions. The smell of death lingered everywhere. Between opposing trenches lay a devastated landscape called no man's land. It was filled with barbed wire, shell craters, and corpses. Whenever commanders ordered attacks, soldiers climbed out of their trenches and crossed open ground directly into enemy fire. Machine guns made these assaults catastrophic. A single machine gun could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, cutting down entire waves of advancing troops within seconds. Artillery became the deadliest weapon of the war. Massive guns bombarded enemy lines continuously, destroying landscapes and causing psychological trauma unlike anything soldiers had experienced before. Battles such as Verdun and the Somme became symbols of unimaginable suffering. At Verdun, France and Germany fought for nearly 10 months. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died in a battle that became a test of endurance rather than strategy. The Battle of the Somme was equally devastating. On the first day alone, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties. Yet despite enormous losses, front lines barely moved. World War I became a war of attrition, a conflict where victory depended on exhausting the enemy's resources and manpower. As the war dragged on, technology transformed warfare in terrifying ways. Poison gas introduced a new level of horror. Chlorined gas and mustard gas drifted across battlefields, blinding and suffocating soldiers. Gas masks became essential, but early versions were unreliable and uncomfortable. Tanks appeared for the first time during the war. Though slow and mechanically unreliable, they were designed to cross trenches and break through enemy defenses. Aircraft also changed warfare dramatically. At first, airplanes were used mainly for reconnaissance, helping armies observe enemy positions from above. But soon, pilots engaged in aerial combat, creating the first dogfights in history. Submarines became another deadly weapon. German U-boats targeted Allied ships in the Atlantic Ocean, attempting to cut supply lines and weaken Britain through starvation. The war spread far beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire joined Germany and Austria-Hungary, opening fronts in the Middle East. Fighting erupted in Africa and Asia as colonial territories became battlegrounds. Millions of colonial soldiers from India, Africa, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand fought alongside European armies. World War I truly became a global conflict. One of the most famous campaigns occurred at Gallipoli in 1915. Allied forces attempted to capture a strategic route controlled by the Ottoman Empire. But poor planning and fierce resistance led to disaster. Thousands of soldiers died, and the campaign ended in failure. Meanwhile, conditions inside many countries worsened. Food shortages spread. Economies suffered. Entire generations of young men were being lost on the battlefield. In Russia, dissatisfaction with the war contributed to revolution. By 1917, the Russian Empire collapsed. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and revolutionary forces eventually seized power. The new Bolshevik government withdrew Russia from the war, allowing Germany to shift troops to the Western Front. While Europe struggled, the United States remained officially neutral. Many Americans believed the war was a European problem and wanted to avoid involvement. But events gradually pushed the United States closer to intervention. German submarine warfare angered Americans, especially after civilian ships were attacked. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915 killed nearly 1,200 people, including American passengers. Public outrage grew. Then came the Zimmermann telegram. Germany secretly proposed an alliance with Mexico, promising support if Mexico attacked the United States. When the message became public, American opinion shifted dramatically. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. American troops and industrial power gave the Allies a major advantage. Fresh American soldiers boosted morale among exhausted Allied forces. Germany understood time was running out. In 1918, Germany launched a massive final offensive on the Western Front, hoping to win before American forces fully arrived. Initially, German troops achieved significant advances, but they lacked supplies and reinforcements. Eventually, Allied forces counterattacked with overwhelming strength. Germany began retreating. At home, the German population faced starvation, unrest, and economic collapse. Germany's allies started surrendering one by one. Austria-Hungary collapsed into separate nations. The Ottoman Empire crumbled. By late 1918, Germany could no longer continue fighting. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed. After more than 4 years of war, the guns finally fell silent. The human cost was staggering. Over 16 million people died. Millions more were wounded, displaced, or psychologically scarred. Entire cities and landscapes were destroyed. Families across the world mourned lost sons, fathers, brothers, and friends. But even though the fighting had ended, the consequences of the war were only beginning. In 1919, world leaders gathered in Paris to negotiate peace. The most important agreement was the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty placed full blame for the war on Germany. Germany was forced to pay massive reparations, surrender territory, reduce its military, and accept strict limitations. Many Germans viewed the treaty as deeply humiliating and unfair. Meanwhile, Europe's political map changed dramatically. The German Empire disappeared. The Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved into multiple new countries. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, reshaping the Middle East. The Russian Empire transformed into the Soviet Union. The League of Nations was created in hopes of preventing future wars through international cooperation. But the League lacked real power and struggled to maintain peace. The war also changed society itself. Women entered factories and workplaces in large numbers during the conflict, transforming traditional social roles. Medical technology advanced rapidly because of wartime necessity. At the same time, millions of veterans returned home traumatized by what they had witnessed. The psychological scars of trench warfare haunted an entire generation. World War I shattered old beliefs about honor, glory, and heroism in war. Before 1914, many people viewed war as noble and patriotic. After 4 years of mechanized slaughter, those illusions disappeared. The conflict became known as the war to end all wars. But tragically, it didn't end war. The harsh peace settlement, economic instability, and unresolved political tensions created conditions that would eventually lead to World War II. In many ways, the Second World War was deeply connected to the First. World War I changed the course of history forever. It ended centuries-old empires. It transformed technology, politics, and society. It demonstrated how quickly nationalism, alliances, and militarism could spiral into global catastrophe, and it revealed the devastating power of industrialized warfare. Even today, the echoes of World War I remain visible across the modern world. National borders created after the war still shape politics. Conflicts in the Middle East trace back to decisions made during and after the war. International organizations designed to maintain peace were inspired by the lessons of the conflict. Most importantly, World War I serves as a warning. It reminds us how fragile peace can be, how quickly fear and rivalry can escalate, and how a single event in the wrong circumstances can change the fate of the entire world. History is not just a collection of dates and battles. It is a story about people, decisions, ambitions, and consequences. And World War I remains one of the most important chapters ever written in that story.